Hey everyone, this is Paul and welcome back. I know it has been a while since I've spoken to you, but here we are. And yeah, you read the title of the episode. We are doing this. So I've been putting this series off for a while now, and I want to be honest with you about why. First of all, the history is fascinating to me. It is some of the most layered, complex history on the planet, and it does fit the show perfectly. Two peoples, same land, competing origin stories, competing traumas. Each one's foundational moment of liberation is tangled up in the other's foundational moment of catastrophe. If you designed a case study for how defining moments shape nations across centuries, you'd design the Israel Palestine. But I've been putting it off because I know that no matter what I say over the next 5 episodes, I'm going to make people really angry. And it's not just a little angry. This is the subject where everyone has already decided what the story is, where every word you choose is a political act, where even the name you use for the land is a declaration of whose sides you're on. So let me just get this out of the way up front. If you're listening to this, hoping that I'll confirm one side is entirely right and the other side is entirely wrong, you're going to be disappointed. That is not what I try to do on this show, and this is not what these episodes are going to be about. I try to do people making choices under impossible circumstances and then living with the consequences of those choices for generations. That is the whole point of Double Helix. I thought about skipping this entirely. I thought about moving on to something safer, something where the wounds aren't still so open and bleeding. But here's the thing that kept nagging at me. Every time I see people arguing about this conflict online or in the news or at dinner tables, what strikes me isn't just how much passion there is, it's how little history there is. People are screaming at each other with absolute moral certainty, and most of them couldn't even tell you what the Balfour Declaration was, or what happened in 1948, or why 1967 changed everything in this conflict, or what Oslo was supposed to be and why it fell apart. And to me, that is the problem. Not too much knowledge, it's too little. When you don't understand how we got here, all you're left with is the horror of the present moment. And horror without context just becomes fuel for more horror. So we're going here. But we're going to start way back. And I mean way back. The furthest back I've gone in the show. With the Roman destruction of Judea in the year 70 of our current era. Because you cannot understand Zionism without understanding 2,000 years of Jewish exile and the longing for return that kept a scattered people intact across centuries. And you also cannot understand Palestinian identity without understanding what it means to have lived on and worked the land for generations, only to be told that someone else's ancient claim supersedes your present reality. Both of these things are true. Both of these experiences are real. And the tragedy, the thing that makes this conflict so resistant to resolution, is that acknowledging one doesn't erase the other. They coexist. We're at Double Helix History Podcast at gmail.com, and I genuinely mean it when I say I do want to hear from you, especially on this series. Before we go into the episode, a quick programming note. So if you've been with the show for a while, you might remember that we did a series on the Colombian conflict and one on the American Civil War. Well, I didn't like how they turned out, so I went back and completely rewrote both of them. It's all new writing, new immersive sound design, the full treatment that we've been getting used to lately. So if you listen to the originals, I think you'll hear a real difference this time. And if you haven't heard them, this is a great opportunity to jump in. They're going to be available pretty soon on the feed, and they're going to pop up as new episodes, even though they're old episodes. And speaking of listening, if you're getting something out of this show, here's how you can help. Please rate us, leave a review, and I know it sounds small, but it genuinely changes how many people discover the podcast. So again, leave a rating, leave a review, and share the episode with someone. You can text it to a friend, you can post it, you can mention it in conversation. And if you have thoughts, feedbacks, ideas for the future series, send them my way again at doublehelixhistorypodcast@gmail.com. Now, for this series specifically, If you think this kind of history matters and this kind of approach matters, trying to understand a conflict rather than just picking a team, please share this with someone who disagrees with you about it. That's who needs to hear it the most. Well, both of you do. All right. We are going to start in the year 70 CE. An empire is raising a nation from the mat. And they are about to create a longing so powerful, it will reshape the world 2,000 years later. The Temple Mount is on fire. Not a wing of it, not a corner, the entire complex. The holiest site in the Jewish world, the place where heaven and earth were supposed to meet, the building that had taken 46 years to rebuild and stood as the beating heart of an entire civilization, is being consumed by flames so intense that the gold plating on its facade is melting, running down the white limestone walls in bright rivulets that the Roman soldiers would later say looked like rivers of light. Titus Flavius, son of the new Emperor Vespasian, 30 years old, commanding the most disciplined military force on earth, is watching from the Mount of Olives. Later, Roman historians will claim he tried to save the temple, that he gave orders to spare it, but the fire was an accident started by an overzealous soldier who threw a torch through a window. But Titus is his father's son, and his father sent him here to end this problem permanently. The Jewish revolt has been raging for 4 years now. It's already cost Rome one humiliated general and an entire legion's eagle standard, the worst disgrace a Roman army can suffer. And Vespasian, who seized the imperial throne during the chaos of the year of the 4 emperors, needs a decisive victory to prove his dynasty deserves to rule. We are in Jerusalem on August 30th of the year 70. Inside the temple, priests are still performing sacrifices. The walls are burning. Roman soldiers are pouring through the outer courts, and priests in white linen robes are still standing at the altar, because this is what they do. This is what their fathers did, and their fathers before that, going back, they believe, to Aaron, the brother of Moses. The daily sacrifice has not been interrupted since the temple was rebuilt after the Babylonian exile 5 centuries ago. They will not be the ones to stop it. A Roman centurion later describes watching a priest complete the afternoon offering as flames licked the ceiling above him. The priest finished the ritual, turned to face the approaching soldiers, and was cut down mid-prayer. When the temple falls, the sound is heard across the city. Josephus writes that the crash was followed by a collective scream from the Jewish population of Jerusalem, a scream of something being torn out of people's souls. Because this is so much more than a building burning. For Jews in the first century, the temple is where God literally lives, where sins are forgiven, where the nation's covenant with the divine is maintained through daily sacrifice. Without the temple, the entire system of atonement, of priestly authority, of divine presence on earth, all of it stops. The relationship between God and his people, as they've understood it for 1,000 years, has just been severed. The center of the universe is collapsing. In the ashes of this burning building, 2 things are born. One is a longing for return so powerful that it will survive 20 centuries of exile, persecution, and attempted extermination. A longing that will eventually create the modern state of Israel. The other is a vacancy, a land that will continue to be lived in, worked, built upon, and loved by the people who remain, whose descendants will become the Palestinians. 2 peoples, 1 land, and it starts here, in the flames. This is part 1 of our series on Israel and Palestine. You know how they say you can't understand someone until you walk a mile in their shoes? Well, I'd argue you can't understand a nation until you've walked through its history. Not just the highlight reel or the sanitized version you find in textbooks. I mean really getting into its DNA. Those defining moments that shaped everything that came after. Those moments where paths were chosen, where decisions were made in palaces and backrooms and city streets that changed the course of millions of lives. I'm your host, Paul, and this is Double Helix, Blueprint of Nations, where we unravel the genetic code of countries through their most transformative moments. Think of it like ancestry testing, but for entire nations. We dig deep into the historical DNA, finding those crucial moments that made countries who they are today. Before Rome burned the temple, we need to understand what Judea was in the first century. And that means briefly answering a question that sounds simple, but really isn't. Who are the Jews, and what is their claim to this land? The Jewish story, as Jews tell it, and as the Hebrew Bible records it, begins with Abraham, roughly 2,000 years before the events of this episode. God makes a covenant with Abraham. Leave your home in Mesopotamia, go to the land I will show you, and I will make your descendants a great nation. The land is Canaan, what will become Israel and Judea. Abraham goes. His grandson Jacob, renamed Israel, fathers 12 sons who become the 12 tribes of Israel. Those tribes end up enslaved in Egypt, are liberated under Moses, wander the desert for 40 years, and eventually return to Canaan to claim what they believe God promised them. Now, how much of that is historical and how much is foundational mythology is a debate scholars have been having for centuries. And it's not one we need to settle here. What matters for our story is this. By roughly the year 1000 BCE, there is an Israelite kingdom in this land. David makes Jerusalem his capital. His son Solomon builds the first temple, the house of God, the center of worship, the physical anchor of the covenant between God and his people. For the next 4 centuries, through civil wars, splits in northern and southern kingdoms, invasion and recoveries, the Jewish people are rooted in this land. It is theirs in the way that a place becomes yours when your ancestors built it, bled for it, wrote their sacred text about it, and buried their dead in it. The first temple is destroyed by the Babylonians in the year 586 BCE. The Jewish elite are exiled to Babylon, and here, already, the pattern begins. Exile, longing, and return. The Psalms, written during the Babylonian captivity, contain lines that will echo for the next 26 centuries. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat and wept when we remember Zion. Within a few generations, the Persians conquered Babylon and allowed the Jews to return. They rebuild their temple, the second temple, the one the Romans are going to destroy. Jewish life in the land resumes. But here's what's crucial. This is the part that tends to get left out of whichever version of history you were taught. The land of Canaan, of Israel, of Judea, whatever name you want to give it, has never belonged to only one people. When the Israelites arrived, Canaanites were already there. When the kingdom rose and fell, other people lived alongside, among and around the Jewish population. This is in fact a crossroads, a narrow strip of fertile land connecting Egypt, Mesopotamia, Arabia, and the Mediterranean, and it has always been home to many people at once. By the 1st century CE, the population of the region is mixed. Jews are the majority in Judea and Galilee, but Greek-speaking pagans, Samaritans, Nabateans, Arabs, Phoenicians, and others lived in coastal cities, the Decapolis, the Negev, and the territory surrounding the Jewish heartland. The Arab presence in and around this land is also ancient. Arab tribes have traded, settled, and migrated through the region for centuries before the Roman period. After the Islamic conquest of the 7th century, that Arab presence will deepen enormously, and over the following centuries, the population becomes predominantly Arabic-speaking and Muslim, with significant Christian communities as well. These are the people whose descendants will become Palestinians. Their connection to the land is built on something quieter than a founding moment or divine covenant. The accumulated weight of generations of living, farming, building, and belonging. They don't need an ancient text to prove that they're from here. They're from here because they've always been here, because the land remembers their labor and their debt. Both claims are old. Both claims are real. And understanding that, holding both of them in your mind at the same time without one canceling the other, is the only way to make sense of what follows. So, 1st century Judea. The Jewish heartland is under Roman occupation, and it is about to explode. Judea wasn't some backwater province that Rome barely noticed. It was a headache. It had been a headache for 100 years. And by 66 CE, it was about to become a migrant. Judea had been under some form of foreign rule for centuries. Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, and now Romans. But unlike most conquered peoples in the ancient world, Jews have the stubborn insistence on monotheism. That makes them terrible imperial subjects. Every other people in the Roman Empire can absorb Roman gods alongside their own. It's easy. You just add Jupiter to the pantheon, put a statue of the emperor in your temple, and everyone gets along. The Romans don't care who else you worship, as long as you acknowledge that Caesar is divine and Rome is supreme. Jews can't do this. The first commandment is, "You shall have no other gods before me." Putting a statue of the emperor in the temple is an existential violation of the covenant with God. It is the single thing they cannot do and remain who they are. Roman imperial control is built on religious incorporation, right? You conquer a people, you fold their god into Roman system. Pretty soon everyone's worshiping together and the conquered people start thinking of themselves as Roman. Gaul, Spain, Britain, North Africa, and Greece. It works every time. Except in Judea. And that drives Rome absolutely crazy. The Romans try to accommodate this. They grant Jews special exemptions. They don't have to sacrifice to the emperor. They can keep their Sabbath. They can maintain their own legal system for religious matters. These are extraordinary concessions by Roman standards. No other subject people get this kind of treatment. But the accommodation breeds resentment on both sides. Romans see Jewish refusal to participate in imperial religion as arrogance. Jews see Roman presence in their holy land as an ongoing desecration. And caught in between are the Jewish elites, the temple aristocracy, the Sadducees, who figured out how to work with Rome while maintaining religious integrity, more or less, and who are getting very, very rich doing it. The real fuel for the revolt is economics and governance, though, more than theology. Roman appointed governors, called procurators, administer Judea with varying degrees of competence and corruption. Some are reasonable, some are catastrophically bad. And the one who finally lights the match is a man named Gessius Florus. Let me take you to the moment the fuse lit. It is the year 66 CE, in Jerusalem. Gessius Florus has a problem. He owes money to the people in Rome who helped him get this appointment. And the province of Judea isn't generating enough revenue to cover his debts and his lifestyle. So he does something that previous procurators knew better than to do. He walks into the temple treasury, and takes 17 talents of silver. Just takes it. Claims is owed to the emperor. 17 talents is roughly the annual income of a small city. And the temple treasury is sacred. These are donations from Jews from across the Roman Empire, money given to God. Florus hasn't robbed the bank, he's robbed God's house. The reaction is immediate. Protests erupt in Jerusalem. Some young men pass baskets through the crowds, mocking Florus by collecting small coins for the poor procurator. It's sarcastic. It's funny. It is also, from a Roman perspective, sedition. Florus responds by unleashing his soldiers on the upper marketplace. They kill approximately 3,600 people in a single afternoon. Men, women, children. Some of the dead are Roman citizens, Jews who hold Roman citizenship, which is supposed to guarantee them legal protection. Florus has them flogged and crucified anyway. The violence itself is familiar. Rome does terrible things to subject peoples regularly. What's new is the exposure. Jewish moderates who've argued for decades that working within the Roman system is the only viable path suddenly have nothing to point to. The system just killed 3,600 people for a joke about a thief. The fiction that accommodation can hold has been stripped bare. Over the next few months, Judea explodes. Rebel factions, the Zealots, the Sicarii, seize Jerusalem. The temple aristocracy tries to maintain orders and fail. The Roman garrison in the Antonia fortress, right next to the temple, is overwhelmed and slaughtered. And when Cestius Gallus, the governor of Syria, marches south with a full legion to restore order, Jewish rebels ambush him in the pass in Beth Horon and hand Rome one of its most shocking military defeats in its history. An entire legion is routed, the eagle standard is captured. For a brief, intoxicating moment, Judea is free. The rebels control Jerusalem, the temple, and most of the countryside. They mint their own coins. Year one of the freedom of Israel. Establish a government, organize militias. For the first time in over a century, Jews govern their own land. But here's what the rebels don't fully reckon with. The Republic fell, emperors were assassinated, civil wars tore the empire apart, and still, Rome won its wars. The machine was bigger than any individual, any setback, any temporary defeat. Rome absorbs losses that would destroy any other state. Instead, they regroup and came back stronger. Rome does not lose, not permanently, not ever. And that's exactly what's about to happen. In February of 67 CE, Emperor Nero gives the Judean command to a general named Vespasian, a competent, unflashy career soldier who has the virtue of being good at his job without being politically threatening. Vespasian brings his son Titus and 3 full legions, 60,000 soldiers plus auxiliaries, the largest army assembled for a single campaign in a generation. Vespasian doesn't rush. This is what makes Rome so lethal, their patience. Where the rebels are passionate, improvise, fractious, Rome is methodical. Vespasian begins in Galilee, the northern region, and works his way south, town by town, fortress by fortress. Each conquest is thorough. Each resistance is crushed with overwhelming force. Each example is set with calculated brutality. Let me take you to one of these sieges, because it tells you everything about what Jerusalem is eventually going to face. We are outside of Jotapah, in Galilee, in July of 67 CE. Jotapah is a hilltop town in Galilee, defended by a Jewish commander named Yosef ben Matizyahu. He's organized the defense as well. The walls hold for 47 days against everything Vespasian throws at them. Roman engineers build ramps, the defenders pour boiling oil. Romans bring up siege towers, the defenders raise the walls higher overnight. It's stubborn, creative, and brave resistance. And yet, it doesn't matter. After 47 days, a deserter tells the Romans about a gap in the night watch. Roman soldiers scale the walls in the darkness, and the town falls in hours. Vespasian orders the entire male population killed and the women and children enslaved. 40,000 people. Then the town is razed. And Yosef ben Matizyahu? Well, he survives. He hides in a cave with 40 other fighters who make a suicide pact. They'll kill each other rather than surrender to Rome. But when it comes down to the last two men, Yosef convinces the other survivors to surrender with him. He's then brought before Vespasian, and in a moment of extraordinary audacity, he tells the Roman general that God has revealed to him that Vespasian will become emperor. 2 years later, when Vespasian does become emperor in the upheaval following Nero's suicide, he remembers the Jewish prisoner's prophecy. Yosef ben Matizyahu is freed, given Roman citizenship, and adopts the family name of his patron. He becomes Titus Flavius Josephus, the historian whose account of these events is one of the few surviving records we have. By the spring of 70 CE, Vespasian is emperor of Rome and his son Titus has taken command of the Judean campaign. Galilee is conquered. The countryside is pacified. Every other center of resistance has fallen. Only Jerusalem remains. And Jerusalem, in 70 CE, is a city at war with itself as much as it is at war with Rome. 3 rival Jewish factions control different parts of the city. John of Giscala holds the Temple Mount with his zealot forces. Simon Bar Kokhba controls the upper city with a mixed army of rebels and freed slaves. And Eleazar ben Simon holds the inner temple itself with a smaller zealot faction. These groups hate each other almost as much as they hate the Romans. They fight in the streets, they burn each other's food supplies, they assassinate each other's leaders. Let me take you inside those walls for a moment, because this internal catastrophe matters enormously. It is after dark in the upper city. 2 groups of fighters, one loyal to John of Giscala, the other to Simon Bar Kokhba, have encountered each other near the granary. The granary holds enough wheat to feed the city for months. Both sides claim it. The argument becomes a skirmish, swords are drawn, someone knocks over a torch, and the granary catches on fire. By morning, one of Jerusalem's largest food stores has been reduced to ash. Not because the Romans burned it, because Jewish factions fighting over who gets control of it burned it themselves. Josephus claims, and other sources partially corroborate, that the factional fighting destroyed enough food to have sustained the city for years. The famine that will kill tens of thousands during the siege isn't entirely Rome's doing. Jerusalem's defenders contributed to their own starvation. This doesn't absolve Rome for what comes next, but it does reveal something that recurs across his entire story. In the revolts against Rome, in the politics of the British Mandate, in Palestinian factionalism between Fatah and Hamas, internal divisions in the face of external threat, the inability to unify, even when survival depends on it. The pattern starts here. Titus arrives with 4 legions outside Jerusalem's north wall in April 14th of 70 CE. The 5th, the 10th, the 12th, and the 15th. Roughly 80,000 soldiers, plus thousands of auxiliaries and camp followers. They surround the city on 3 sides. The 4th side is the Kidron Valley, so steep it functions as a natural wall. For the population trapped inside, swollen to perhaps 1 million people because pilgrims who came for Passover can't leave, the sight of the Roman camps on every hilltop must have been paralyzing. And yet, the factional fighting does not stop. John and Simon continue their civil war inside the walls, while Titus builds siege ramps outside of them. It takes the first Roman assault on the outer wall and the Roman battering rams physically shaking the stones beneath their feet before the rival factions declare a temporary truce and turn to face the actual enemy. The siege lasts 5 months. The Romans breach the outer walls in 15 days. The defenders are fighting with the desperation of people who know there will be no surrender terms, no mercy, and no negotiation. Street by street, the Romans push deeper. The defenders fall back to the Temple Mount, the most heavily fortified position in the city, with walls that have stood for centuries. And during those 5 months, the famine does its work. Let me take you to a scene that Josephus describes in detail, so specific it haunts the page. A woman named Mary, from the town of Bethzuba, has come to Jerusalem as a refugee. She's wealthy, or was wealthy before the war took everything. She brought provisions, but the factional fighters confiscated them. Every time she finds food, armed men break in and take it. She's been surviving on scraps, leather, grass, anything that can be swallowed. She has an infant son. What I'm about to describe is one of the most disturbing passages in ancient literature, and Josephus recorded this account for a reason. Even if his reasons was Roman propaganda, the suffering behind it was real. I'm going to tell you what he wrote. Josephus describes Mary, half mad with hunger, looking at her child and saying, "Poor infant, in war, famine, and sedition, for whom shall I preserve thee?" She kills her son. She roasts the body. She eats half of it and conceals the other half. The smell of the cooked meat draws the factional fighters, the same men who've been stealing the food for months. They break down her door, swords drawn, demanding she share whatever she's hiding. Mary pulls back the cloth, covering what remains. "Come eat," she tells them, "for I have eaten also. Do not pretend to be more tender than a woman, or more compassionate than a mother." The fighters, men who have killed without hesitation, who have burned their own city grain stores, who have waged civil war in the shadows of Roman siege ramps, flee the house in horror. Josephus says the whole city trembles when word spreads. Even Titus, when he hears of it, reportedly invokes the gods as his witness, saying he offered peace and that this is the defenders' doing. Josephus records this to serve Rome, to say, look at what this people became. They brought this on themselves. The account is designed to justify the destruction that follows, to shift moral responsibility from the besieging army to the besieged population. But what Josephus is actually documented, whether he intends to or not, is what siege warfare does to human beings. What it did here, what it will do in Leningrad and Sarajevo, what it does every time an army decides that starvation is a legitimate weapon. The horror tells you about the besieger's cruelty, not the defender's character. By August, the dead are piling so high inside the walls that the living can't bury them. Bodies are thrown over the wall into the valleys below. Titus, riding around the city, reportedly sees ravines filled with corpses and raises his hands to God, saying, this isn't his doing. It is, of course, entirely his doing. We are back where we started. The temple is burning. The final assault on the Temple Mount takes weeks of preparation and hours of actual combat. Roman engineers build massive ramps against the outer walls. The defenders pour down everything they have: arrows, stones, boiling oil, their own bodies thrown against the scaling ladders and suicidal counterattacks. But the math is relentless. Rome has more men, more resources, and more time. When the Romans finally breach the walls of the temple complex, the fighting becomes hand-to-hand in the courtyards and colonnades. Roman soldiers, who had been losing comrades to this siege for months, are beyond discipline. They kill everyone they find. Josephus describes the blood pooling in the temple court so deep that it extinguishes fires as it flows downhill. And then the fire. Whether ordered by Titus or started by his soldiers doesn't ultimately matter. The temple burns, and with it burns the center of Jewish civilization. Here's what you need to understand about what was lost. The temple was the only place on earth where certain essential religious functions could be performed. The daily sacrifices, the atonement rituals on Yom Kippur, when the high priest entered the Holy of Holies, the one room where God's presence was believed to physically dwell, and ask forgiveness for the sins of the entire nation. The system of purity, of pilgrimage, of religious law that organized every aspect of Jewish life, all of it anchored to this one building, this one location, this one set of stones. When it burned, the entire operating system of Jewish religion crashed. Priests had no altar, sacrifices could not be performed, the relationship between God and Israel, as it had been understood and maintained for thousands of years, was broken. Titus orders the entire Temple Mount demolished, completely. The stones are pried apart. Legend says Roman soldiers searching for melted gold that seeped between them until the site is reduced to bedrock. The 10th Legion camps on its ruins. The rest of the city fares no better. Jerusalem is systematically leveled. Josephus claims 1.1 million dead during the siege. That number is almost certainly exaggerated. It's probably closer to a few 100,000, but even the conservative estimates describe a slaughter on an almost incomprehensible scale. The survivors, roughly 97,000 according to Josephus, are enslaved. The young and the strong are sent to the mines or die in the arena spectacles across the empire. Some are taken to Rome itself, where they're paraded through the streets in Titus's triumph. The Ark of Titus, which still stands in the Roman Forum today, depicts Roman soldiers carrying the temple's golden menorah and sacred objects through the streets of Rome. If you visit, you can still see the carving. 2,000 years later, the theft is immortalized in stone. The destruction of the temple is a hinge point. Everything before it is one story. Everything after it is another story. Because what happens next, how Jews respond to the loss of their center, creates something that has never existed before in human history. A people who maintain their identity through memory, text, and an unbroken promise to return. No territory, no political power, and no state. Just the words, and their refusal to forget. In the ruins of the Jewish civilization, an old rabbi does something extraordinary. His name is Yochanan ben Zakkai. During the siege of Jerusalem, he reportedly had himself smuggled out of the city in a coffin, faking his own death to get past both the Jewish rebels who killed anyone trying to leave and the Roman forces who killed anyone trying to escape. He asked the Romans for permission to establish a small academy at Yavne, a town on the coastal plain. It seems like a modest request. A school, an old man and his students studying religious law in a quiet town far from the smoking ruins of Jerusalem. The Romans granted. Why wouldn't they? The temple is destroyed, the priesthood is finished, the political and military power of the Jewish nation is obliterated. An old rabbi running a study group is no threat. They could not have been more wrong. Because what Ben Zakkai does at Yavne is reinvent Judaism from the ground up. The temple is gone? Fine. Prayer replaces sacrifice. The synagogue replaces the temple. The rabbi replaces the priest. The Torah, the text, studied, debated, interpreted, and argued over endlessly, replaces the buildings as the centers of Jewish life. A religion built around a specific place, a specific building, a specific set of physical rituals is quickly transformed into something that can be practiced anywhere on earth. You don't need the temple anymore. You need 10 Jews and a scroll, a portable faith, a nation that you can carry in your head. The rabbis at Yavne and their successors accomplished this transformation over the next few generations by creating what becomes the Talmud, an enormous sprawling compendium of legal discussions, ethical debates, storytelling, and theological arguments that essentially replaces the temple as the organizing structure of Jewish life. If the temple was the hardware, the Talmud is the software, and software can run on any machine. But here's the crucial thing they embed into the system. The thing that will matter more than anything else for the next 2,000 years. They build return into the operating code. Every prayer faces Jerusalem. Every Passover ends with next year in Jerusalem. Every wedding breaks a glass in memory of the temple's destruction. Every fast mourns what they lost. The message, repeated daily, weekly, yearly, across generations and continents and centuries. This is not home. We are in exile. The real home is there, and we are going back. It is not a plan, not yet, not for a very long time, but it is a posture, an orientation, a refusal to fully settle into whatever the exiles take from them. "60 years after the destruction of the temple, the Emperor Hadrian visits the province of Judea in one of his famous tours of the empire. Hadrian is a builder. He's constructing monuments and cities across the Roman world, and he decides that the ruins of Jerusalem need to be properly developed. He announces plans to build a new Roman city on the site, complete with a temple to Jupiter on the Temple Mount. For Jews who've spent 60 years praying to the temple's restoration, mourning its loss 3 times a day, teaching their children that return is a matter of divine promise and not a question of if, but when, the idea of a pagan temple on the holiest site in Judaism is beyond provocation. Hadrian also reportedly bans circumcision across the empire, not specifically targeting Jews, but effectively criminalizing one of the most fundamental markers of Jewish identity. Whether the ban causes a revolt or the revolt causes the ban is debated by historians, but the timing makes it inseparable from what happens next. A man named Simon Bar Kokhba emerges as the leader of a new revolt. Rabbi Akiva, the most prominent rabbi of his generation, a towering figure in Jewish learning, declares him the Messiah and gives him the name Bar Kokhba, son of the star. This is a serious, organized insurrection. Bar Kokhba builds a disciplined army, mints coins declaring year 1 of the redemption of Israel, and establishes an administration, and for roughly 2.5 years, he holds off the Roman Empire. Let me take you underground, because this revolt is fought unlike anything Rome has encountered before. We are in a key complex, the Judean hills, in the year 133. The Judean wilderness is riddled with caves, thousands of them, connected by passages that the local population knows and the Romans don't. Bar Kokhba's fighters use these caves as bases, supply depots, hospitals, and escape routes. They launch guerrilla attacks on Roman positions and vanish underground. Roman patrols enter the caves and don't come out. Archaeologists have found letters from Bar Kokhba in these caves, actual correspondence preserved in the dry desert air for nearly 2,000 years. The letters reveal a leader who is by turns strategic, demanding, petty, and desperate. He orders supplies, disciplines subordinates, arranges for ritual palm fronts to be delivered to his fighters for religious observance, even in the middle of a war. The mundane details make him real in a way that Josephus's grand narratives don't. The letters also reveal what the rebels are fighting for. One reads, "From Simon Bar Kokhba to the men of Ein Gedi, you sit eating and drinking from the possession of the house of Israel, and you do not care about your brothers." Hadrian sends his best general, Julius Severus, recalled from Britain for this purpose. Severus doesn't try to fight the guerrillas on their own terms. He does what Rome always does. He takes his time. He seals the cave mouths. He destroys villages one by one. He cuts off water supplies. He turns the landscape itself into a weapon. The revolt collapses in 135 CE. Bar Kokhba dies in his last stronghold at Petar. According to Roman sources, 580,000 Jewish fighters are killed. 50 fortified towns are destroyed. 985 villages are razed. The numbers, even if exaggerated, describe near total devastation. What Hadrian does after the Bar Kokhba revolt is even more devastating than the military defeat itself. He renames the province Judea, the name that connects this land to the Jewish people derived from Judah, the biblical tribe. The ancient kingdom is abolished. The province becomes Syria Palaestina, Palestina, from the Philistines, an ancient coastal people who had been enemies of Israel and who had been gone from the region for centuries. Hadrian reaches into the dead past for a name specifically chosen to sever the connection between the Jewish people and their land. He bans Jews from Jerusalem entirely. Any Jew found within city limits is executed. The only exception, and this one might be the cruelest part, is one day a year, on the anniversary of the temple's destruction, when Jews are permitted to enter the city to weep on the ruins, to stand at the one remaining wall, what we now call the Western Wall. He builds his Roman city. He calls it Aelia Capitolina, on top of Jerusalem. The temple to Jupiter goes up on the Temple Mount. Statues of Roman gods stand where the Ark of the Covenant was believed to have rested. The streets are laid out in a Roman grid, erasing the ancient geography. The message is clear. Judea is over. The Jewish nation is finished. This land belongs to Rome now, and its Jewish part is being physically overwritten. Viewed from 135 CE, Hadrian's plans should work. The temple is destroyed, the population is devastated, the land is renamed. The capital is rebuilt as a pagan city from which Jews are banned. Every physical marker of Jewish connection to the land has been eliminated or appropriated. By any rational calculation, the Jewish story of this land is over. But Hadrian made the same miscalculation that every empire that has tried to destroy the Jews has made, from Babylon to the medieval expulsion to the Holocaust. He assumed that destroying the physical infrastructure of Jewish life would destroy Jewish identity. He did not understand what Ben Zakkai had built at Yavne. The rabbis had already moved the center of Jewish life from a building to a book, from a place to a practice, from a territory to a text. The Zionist movement that begins in the 1880s doesn't emerge from nowhere. It emerges from this, from the destruction of the temple, from Hadrian's erasure, from 2,000 years of exile in which Jewish communities maintained, against all odds, the belief that they would return. When Theodor Herzl writes The Jewish State in 1896, he's drawing on a longing that is 18 centuries old. When Jewish immigrants arrived in the Ottoman Palestine in the 1880s and 1890s, they believed, with the full force of religions and historical identity, that they're coming home, that this is the land God promised to Abraham, that the exile is finally ending. They see themselves as pilgrims, refugees, people who have faced persecution in every country that hosted them, and who are done waiting for the world to be kind. And the land they're returning to has never been empty, not for a single day since the Romans expelled the Jews. For nearly 2,000 years, other people have lived here, farmed here, built homes and raised children and buried their dead here. Arab communities, predominantly Muslim but also Christian, have developed their own deep generational connection to this place, a connection built on presence, continuity, the simple, powerful fact that this is where their families have been for as long as anyone can remember. Hadrian renamed the land to erase Jewish identity, but in the centuries that followed, the name he chose, Palestina, Palestine, became real. It became what the people living there called home. An act of imperial cruelty became, over time, a genuine identity. Jewish longing for return, forged in the flames of 70 CE, maintained across 20 centuries of exiles, given desperate urgency by persecution and attempted genocide. Palestinian connection to the land, built through centuries of continuous habitation, cultivation, community, and belonging. Neither one is invented, neither one is illegitimate, and neither one cancels the other out. Next time, on Double Helix, we jump forward nearly 2,000 years to a moment when an exhausted British Foreign Secretary writes 67 words that will reshape the Middle East forever. It is November of 1917, and Arthur Balfour has just promised the Zionist movement a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, without asking the people already living there what they think about it. We'll trace how European anti-Semitism drives Jewish immigration, how the collapse of the Ottoman Empire creates a power vacuum filled by British imperial calculations, and how two competing nationalisms, one Jewish, one Arab, collide in a territory governed by a fading empire that has promised the same land to both of them. Until then, thank you for listening. We will see you soon.